Okay, looks like we have us back. I would call to order this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu.
Here.
Councilmember Evans.
Here.
Councilmember Hersey.
Here.
Councilmember Colasetti.
Here.
Councilmember Bishop.
Here.
Councilmember Wilkin.
Here.
Councilmember Quisenberry.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Thank you. Next is approval of minutes from previous meetings. We have none listed. Next is additions to the agenda for tonight. Yes, Mayor.
I would ask that under new business G2, that item be moved to the Committee of the Whole on February 17th. That's the Dutch Brothers proposal. The proponents are ill today. So that whole presentation will move to the 17th.
Thank you. And I don't think we need any action on that. Okay, thank you. Any other additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, next is presentations and public input. No scheduled presentations. It is now time for public input. If anyone would like to address the Committee of the Whole, please approach the microphone. We have a few people who have emailed us and asked that to be read into the record. Good evening, Council. Please read my comments into the public record if time permits. I'm writing to encourage you to continue the effort to create a public process around the acquisition and use of police surveillance technology. I appreciate Councilmember Wilkins' thoughtful response to Council concerns with the language from Boston's resolution. If there are still outstanding concerns from staff or council members, I encourage the council to direct staff to amend the list of excluded and included technologies to something they are comfortable with and review by public and council. This ordinance, as it currently is drafted, would not exclude any technology from use and would not apply to technology that is not in use. It simply requires the police department to provide a policy and track how surveillance technology is used. This is something I would hope they are already doing. Transparency and clear policies are crucial to maintaining fairness while reducing bias and liability for the city. In addition, transparency is the best investment we can make in community engagement to improve the image of the police department. Please don't let the hard work on this ordinance go to waste. Let's get this done. Thanks, Jane McClintock. Next one reads, Urbana City Council members, please enter my words into the public record. Feel free to skip over the lengthy URLs. Thank you. I want to make sure that the council members have read the same articles that Urbana citizens have read about Flock Safety's automatic license plate readers. Flock Safety supplies many of the plate readers in surrounding communities, and Urbana has previously considered hosting Flock plate readers. The articles that I mentioned below speak to a pattern of poor judgment and law breaking by Flock. They cast doubt on the safety and legality of hosting these its plate readers. I support ordinance number 2024-12-042 to establish city council approval of police surveillance like Flock plate readers. The city of Norfolk, Virginia is being sued in federal court on Fourth Amendment grounds over their use of Flock Safety. The complaint states that the city has, quote, uninstalled a network of cameras that make it functionally impossible for people to drive anywhere without having their movements tracked, photographed, and stored as in an AI-assisted database that enables the warrantless surveillance of their move, unquote. Previous court decisions have found this type of persistent warrantless surveillance unconstitutional. Norfolk's use of Flock Safety may be found unconstitutional on similar grounds. Read more, and I'll appreciate not reading the links. In 2022, a 2022 story in The Guardian explores how Flock's license plate readers can be used by law enforcement to stalk women who seek abortions across state lines, and a link to read more on that. A company for whose stated goals is to eliminate crime, Flock breaks the law a lot. In state after state, they have put their cameras on public property without getting the necessary permits. When an IDOT employee spoke to them about their error-filled permit applications, they allegedly threatened the employee with visits from 30 different police chiefs, and a link to read more on that. Flock was recently in trouble with the Texas Department of Public Safety for operating without the private investigator's license that Texas law requires them both to hold, and a link to read more. In an eyebrow-raising move, Flock hired the mayor of a California City. Now he is suing Flock for improper termination. Flock allegedly asked him to use his office to benefit Flock. When he refused, the suit alleges that they retaliated by firing him, and a link on that. Finally, the ACLU is unequivocal in its opposition to mass surveillance technology, and they have said this, and they have this to say about Flock's Safety's automatic license plate reader system. Quote, if the police or government leaders are pushing for Flock in your community, we urge you to oppose it, full stop, end quote. They explain their position, more quotes, there's no reason the technology should be used to create comprehensive records of everybody's comings and goings, and that is precisely what ALPR databases like Flock's are doing. In our country, the government should not be tracking us unless it has individualized suspicion that we're engaged in wrongdoing, end quote, and a link on that. That is from David Young. Next is to Dear Mayor Marlin, council members, Wu Evans, Hersey, Colasetti, Bishop Wilkham, Colasetti. I submit public input for tonight's council meeting. Please read aloud if time permits. Thank you in advance. My name is Lila Leopold, and I am a resident of Urbana, Ward 4. I write in support of the police surveillance technology oversight ordinance authored by Alderperson Grace Wilkin of Ward 6. This seems in keeping with the kind of transparency that both council and the police have repeatedly said is incredibly important to maintaining trust in our community. There also seems to be a mischaracterization of this ordinance as going against best practices in public safety. Therefore, it seems worth stating that an ordinance such as this one offers council oversight of surveillance technology used by our police force. Oversight, it should not be equated with outright denial. Oversight of police surveillance technology would not prevent the approval of technologies used. Council are beholden to members of our community and are responsible for taking care of the daily infrastructural components that affect us all. Asking that links between council and police remain strong and transparent as more and more technologies are introduced into our community is a best practice. A call for an ordinance, it should not be taken personally as a comment on how any member of our public safety forces does their job. It seems like an incredibly reasonable ask, especially given so many current technologies involve such a degree of non-human decision-making that will only increase. I hope all members of our council and police force will see the police surveillance technology oversight ordinance as a call for creating a safety net that preserves human decision-making between branches of our community leadership at an important historical moment, as well as we all learn more about the tools that enter our community together. Please forward with serious discussion of the police surveillance technology oversight. Thank you, Lila Leopold. And last one to read for tonight reads to Mayor and City Council. I write in support of the ordinance that establishes the council's governing authority over new police surveillance technology and databases. At a time when the power of the police is being amplified by technological innovations, we must be proactive in protecting the public's right to know and participate in decisions that affect public safety. Notice that the ordinance is not about the Urbana Police Department and the officers who work there. It is not about the police chief and his policies. It is not even about the city council, nor any of the employees of the city. Rather, the ordinance is about good government and preserving the voice of the people. As we witness daily the new Republican president's attempts to circumvent the power of Congress to apply checks and balances to the executive branch, I urge us all to respond to a higher standard by ensuring that the city council and the citizens of Urbana have a say in surveillance tools used in police in the city. Respectfully, John Koester. And that's all the ones I had to read. Any others that were asked to be read? Any change of minds in the live audience? Okay. Seeing none, I think that wraps up public input. Next is staff report. Is there anything to report?
Thank you.
Okay, then our next item of business is old business. We have ordinance 2022-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval, policy, and reporting requirements for policing surveillance technologies and databases. Yes, Mayor Mullen.
I just wanted to catch everybody up to date, since we really haven't had a discussion on this since it was introduced in December 16th, but I wanted to let the public know what information has been gathered in the meantime. So The UPD staff has provided council, and that was in the packet for the meeting scheduled for January 6th, the list of law enforcement databases. There was a supplemental memo in the January 21st packet that provided a list of the UPD-issued technology that could be used for surveillance. And then for the meeting that was scheduled last week, there was another supplemental memo from the legal staff that provided a review of ordinances from other communities. So those memos and information that was included in the packet addressed a number of the questions that had been raised when the ordinance was first introduced. So I guess what from the city standpoint or the staff standpoint is, number one, is there any additional background information that the council needs to have before tackling this ordinance itself? A question came in today about Cellebrite and comments about Cellebrite. There will be a presentation on Cellebrite, what it is as a digital forensic tool for criminal investigations, and that'll be prepared for the February 17th meeting. So there will be more information forthcoming on that. And then the comment that had been made from the beginning was a request that council focus this ordinance on surveillance technology and specifically not on investigation tools used for investigation. So that's still a request that the ordinance focuses on surveillance. And I appreciate the revisions made to the original ordinance that Councilmember Wilkin has circulated. That's a good start. So the question is next steps. James.
James.
Yeah, I want to start out with thanking Grace for the additional information from the Boston ordinance. I thought that was very useful. In fact, I would say that the report from Boston was a really good example of what that might look like and how effective it might be without being an overly large document. One thing I know Grace has made a pass at editing this ordinance to utilize some of the information from the Boston ordinance. What I still find with the way it's written at this point is it does still refer frequently to policing technology as opposed to differentiating surveillance versus investigative technology, because I think both of those things fall under what I might call policing technology. The other thing that I noticed from it is under definitions, the Boston policy included a definition of exigent circumstances, which I understand to mean things are so dire, somebody's life or personal injury is defined as imminent, and a technology is used to preserve that life or protect someone from that kind of. The definitions in our version, our updated version of the ordinance, but there's no place in the ordinance where we add, how we feel. I think of the Boston ordinance, it describes it, and then it has a qualification on it specifically about it can't be used in context of someone, protesting lawfully, I think is the exemption that it gives for it. So I would like for us to add something to this that defines what we think an exigent circumstance is. I do believe I'm mostly comfortable with the definition of surveillance technology. I feel like we're still missing the definition of investigative technology. I know there's a list of what's in and what's out, but the terms like database and data collection are thrown around a lot in circumstances that I don't think I would include in this. I also don't see an exemption in here for body cameras, which are required by state law? Where is it? Help me find it, Grace.
It's one of the not included technologies in the definitions. It says those required by state law and mounted on a vehicle, I believe.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I mean, I could see
Number
how it
4
could be in there.
and 5 on the not included specific examples.
But but it's a body camera. It's not something installed.
Pursuant to
vehicle.
state law authorization in or on vehicle along public right-of-way. I
Yeah,
was looking for if that included and a body, yeah.
it doesn't.
Okay.
I look carefully for it. I couldn't find it. I think that's the intent of what that one is supposed to do, but, so that needs to be tweaked. The other thing that I just have kind of a challenge with is the standard for approving or policing technology or database. Section A, which is the only section there, talks about how the city council should do these things in the future. I have a concern about something that seems to be worded to tell future council on how they should do things. I understand what the intent is here, but I don't think we can compel a future council to make a decision in the way that we define it now. They'll make the decision based on how they look at the world at that time. I call that out particularly because there are two sides to this question that's documented here, which are the issues that we're trying to surface in this ordinance, but also the community has public safety expectations that may drive the need or the use for something that balance with some of these other concerns. So that section I still have a little bit of challenge for those two reasons. But I really appreciate the improvements that we've had. I also appreciate the information shared by staff. I think I have heard, although some people have said otherwise, I've heard an openness. I recall even when we were talking about LPRs originally in 2022, might even been 2021. One of the things that we talked about, I recall talking with Chief Serafin about, was logs and analysis of how the tool is being used as kind of, I think, what some people are referring to as guidelines and audit capabilities. And at that point, I felt like we were able to talk about those kinds of policies. I would similarly like to see some examples of how our police team would define those things and see if they make sense with what the expectations of the various council members are.
Chandra?
I had sent some ideas of proposed amendments that included the use of technology in an emergency. I don't know if it was a while ago, probably back in December when we first talked about it. And it included just saying, like, I'll read it, in cases of imminent and significant threats to public safety requiring the immediate use of new policing technology or databases, the Urbana Police Department may request temporary emergency approval from the mayor, and then the mayor must notify the city council within 24 hours, and then the technology may be deployed for a period not exceeding 90 days. And during this period, the standard approval process must be initiated. So it's kind of what you were talking about, James. That was the wording that I thought could be added somewhere in there.
Mary Alice?
Yeah, so, yes, thank you to everybody. It seems like there's been a lot of people working on this and providing input. Along some of the lines that people are talking about, I think that some of the consistency needs to be done, but that's just kind of copy editing stuff. So, for example, I mean, the title of this is Police Surveillance Technology, but then in all the therefores, it's policing technology. We just need to insert surveillance because it's a specific kind of technology, right? Another thing that I caught was in the definitions for exigent circumstances, it talks about a police commissioner. We don't have a police commissioner. So those types of kind of copy editing things need to go on through. But I think a larger thing would be talking a little bit about what this covers and what it doesn't cover. And so now I haven't read through all of the different links that you gave me, but I was looking at Oakland's specific ordinance, and two of these things are some examples, not necessarily that we need to use these explicitly, but I think that they would be something that we want to consider. So in Oakland, for example, they say, whereas there are other forms of surveillance technology that uses biometric information, where such information is not collected in real time, such technology is vital to the traditional operations of the police department and crime laboratory for solving violent crimes. So I'm just using this as an example of something that might be on the list, but the purpose is different. And that speaks a little bit to what James was saying about investigative. In addition, they also have, this is excluded, traditional records management systems, including computer-aided dispatch systems, field-based reporting systems, et cetera. I mean, those are just everyday things that the police department has to use for their job. And I think it would be good for us to explicitly say that's not part of what the intent of this is. And so those are just some examples, and as we go through that, I think it would be good to, in addition, to sit down with the police department and figure out, you know, what other concerns they might have or other items that they use in their day-to-day job that may or may not fall into this. Because at the end of the day, we want everybody to have the same expectation and the same understanding of what we mean by these different items. So to me, that's one of the big next steps for this. And then just as a little aside, as I was looking through some of the definitions of databases, since I do work with data every day, I'll probably be proposing some items. I did want clarity on adding a new field. So I know that in order to add a new field to a database, at least in one version of this, it said that they had to have explicit permission. Can you define for me what you mean by field?
Are you referring to, like in section 1, where it says that essentially we would need approval for a database, and so I definitely hear you with some wording things. So either a new surveillance technology or whatever we'll call it, or an existing technology or database in a new manner not previously approved, is what it says there. So linking, or this is in the ordinance itself, section 1A, just saying about what would need approval. So either something that is completely new or that is existing but is changing, so being used in a new manner not previously approved, which includes linking or cross-referencing existing databases, adding new categories of data to a database, or using new analytical tools on an existing database, is what's currently written there.
I have a lot of paper that I'm trying to find the exact spot that I was
Sorry,
looking
I think
for.
that's page 21 of our council packet that includes the unapproved minutes. Oh, but there aren't any, so we're all on the same page number, maybe.
What it looks like to me.
Yeah, so the first, therefore, section 1A.
Bottom corner, section 1A.
And we finished with the floor?
Yeah, those are my main things is, you know, A, figuring out like what items are just part of day-to-day operations. B, trying to have a common understanding of everybody the community, council, staff, et cetera, so we all understand what we mean by surveillance technology. And C, looking a little bit deeper into some of the definitions of data and databases. Those are my big takeaways at the moment, and cleaning up some of the language.
Thank you. Sharice, did you have any discussion at this time?
Yes, actually. I need to understand exactly Could I be given an example of a situation where there's an emergency and we have to get permission, or they have to get permission from us within a 24-hour period? But if it's an emergency, I want to understand how that works. How we have an emergency that we get 24 hours to answer to. I didn't understand how that type of policy would actually work. If it's an emergent, then it seems like it's something that would have to be taken care of right away. Or if we're using somebody else's, is there something if we have to get somebody else's technology in order for our police officer to our police department to solve something that is emergent, are they punished for that? Because it seems like you said it'd be unlawful for the police to enter into any contract or other agreement. But what if we have to use somebody else's equipment because it's emergent?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's directed at me or towards the group, which I
Directed
think
at
is...
whoever can answer the question.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate for the group since this discussion is figuring out those points. I think, from my understanding, what's been suggested is looking at the Boston ordinance as an example, which I did include the definition of exigent circumstance in my updated definitions. It's in purple up at the top, and I did just copy this.
I understand exigency, but what I'm saying is that if in fact it is something that is, I don't know how to think about it, but let's say it's I hate to say it, put it this way, a school shooting, and they're not keeping hostages. What would you expect the UPD to do? What technology would be okay?
And so I think
approved for them to have?
What we're talking about in this discussion is just the surveillance technology. So if there were an emergency situation and the department wanted to use a new surveillance technology that was not currently approved, then that's something that we can consider adding. And we have examples from other cities on the definition of that situation and the process in place. And I think the idea is so that it wouldn't hold things up. So if there were an emergency that we can't foresee at this time, and there was a need to access some surveillance data, that there's a process in place to do that quickly without going through the whole process for a limited amount of time, and then go through the approval process for permanent implication of that technology.
Okay.
Yes.
I just didn't see how that concurs with the it being unlawful for the department to actually even, because when you say any contract, that encompasses basically everything, even in emergent situations, unless you want to fix that particular language.
Jaya?
Thank you. I'm just noting, I think, a challenge we're having there. I agree, there's been a lot of great progress. Certainly the work Grace has put into it, the feedback from city staff. But there have been a number of times already where people are like, oh, this thing isn't here, but it is, or, oh, this thing got missed over here. And I'm just wondering if we can try to create maybe a process to help compile the pieces that people are comfortable with in a way that's bringing these pieces together a little bit. So it's not a specific recommendation, but just kind of noting that even in this conversation, there have been a number of times where it's like, oh, I thought that was there, or it is there, but it's in a different place. And it's a little bit hard to keep moving this forward when we've got so many different versions to look at least for myself, having a screen versus maybe if I laid them all out. But I don't know if that would mean something more like a study session or some more clearly dedicated time for this purpose, but just want to note that I think we're going to continue to hit some roadblocks if we're looking at 3 to 5 versions of the same thing.
Thank you. Mary Alice, would you take the chair, please?
Sure, I'll take the chair. The chair recognizes Grace.
Thank you. I appreciate the input tonight, and I definitely have some notes. I agree with that. Yeah, there's been a lot of versions and a lot of different memos, and I was finding myself getting lost in all of it as well. Just to clarify for tonight, when I'm referencing the updated version of the ordinance that I'm proposing starts on page 20, and it's pretty much the exact same that we've seen from the get-go. The main difference is the definitions on page 24 through 26 or 7. Oh, there's a lot of definitions, but starting on page 24, and I've got the swapped out new recommendations from the City of Boston in red, and then in purple, just that exigent circumstances definition, which is just directly copied from the City of Boston. I didn't take time to tailor it, so I definitely agree with Mary Alice's points. There's probably some position that's not relevant. I just wanted to put these in here and see how we felt about it before I went through wordsmithing all of it, so I will find and replace policing technology with surveillance technology and those things, but I wanted to see if we were on board with that before finagling with it even more. So again, those exigent circumstances are in purple. I didn't include them anywhere in the actual ordinance, so it sounds like maybe there is a desire for that, and definitely, yeah, heard you on that one, Chandra, and I appreciate the input early on. The City of Boston, as I said, has examples of not only the definition, but also how to implement it. It seems pretty common sense. I think a lot of us have maybe been looking over that ordinance, and I'd be happy to make some proposed additions for the next time we revisit this. Yeah, I think good feedback in making sure that we specifically include body worn, state authorized or required cameras. Looking at some of my other notes here. Yeah, so I agree with some of those things, and I'm happy to go over a new revision. I also wanted to thank the staff for some of this review and compiling. I think that was really helpful table, especially of the different things. I think that overall, you know, I'm still open to any specific feedback. It sounds like so far we are generally in line with other cities and what we're working towards from some of the model legislation. So from here, I think it's, you know, it's up to us as a majority where we go from here, but I'm definitely open to even remaining in Cal a little bit longer and would make a dedicated effort to combine some of this feedback from notes tonight and that we've heard from staff, and I'm happy to have any individual communication as allowable, and also like the idea of a study session. I'm open for that if there's also availability and interest. I think that's all I have for now.
Would you like the chair back?
Yes.
All right, I relinquish the chair.
Thank you. James.
I really like the suggestion of a study session because this involves wordsmithing, and unfortunately the Open Meetings Act did not anticipate Google Docs where we could all put it in there and everybody have at it until we had something everybody could agree with. But the study, even a committee of the whole where we don't have a bunch of other things on the agenda, I really think we could work through this in an hour of focused energy, particularly after Grace does the edits that she has already, I think, volunteered to do based on what she heard tonight. But I do appreciate the suggestion of a study session.
Yes, Mayor Rollin.
Has anyone spoken with anyone on in the police department regarding what they may deem actually is something that they need to do their jobs as opposed to something that's extra?
I have not heard any direct response to my emails, but I would appreciate if the mayor would like to weigh in on how the different departments collaborated as far as the staff input and memo.
Well, the memos were compiled by the staff. I was, to follow up on Sharice's comment, which is the direction I was going, is at some point, I think after you've incorporated the comments you heard tonight, it needs to go back to UPD, and I would like them to have the opportunity to line by line go through the technologies that are included, the ones that are accepted, and get feedback on how this is going to impact the way they do their jobs. So once you get the
Yeah, because what I'm afraid of is that everyone wants to put their. I'm not a law enforcement professional. Okay, I've had a classroom. I've not had a police car or something where I know what I need to do my job, and I just don't want our police department to be sitting in it, waiting around like Andy and Mayberry because of the fact that they don't have the proper tools that they need to do their jobs because city council deemed it unnecessary, or you have to get permission, and all that kind of stuff. I don't want them to be in danger, and if we haven't discussed any of this with them, then we run to me a risk of not just putting our police officers in danger, but the residents of Urbana as well. And I think that we need to be very careful about what we want to say they need and what they know they need. And the only way that can really come to some kind of understanding is if they are a part of the discussion.
Yes, thank you. Diane, did you have anything else to add?
That's
You have the floor.
exactly true. So they need to be part of the discussion at the study session, and especially attachment A. That's the meat of this thing. So,
Yes, Carol.
I think another thing that would be helpful, at least in my mind, is I hear that the focus is surveillance technology, but there's still a lot of language about databases, and I'm not sure what the driving force is behind that. And there's the list that Dave Smizer put together for you. Those are databases that we sometimes we use routinely, and sometimes we use when we need to use them because they're available, but we don't maintain them. We just consult them if we have a certain kind of a case. So I think it would be helpful for staff, and also I want to also maybe if you would allow Matt to weigh in, because he read all the different ordinances that were enacted in other jurisdictions, just to help understand what role, what are you driving at with all the databases, and what constitutes one that you want, one that is routine versus one that is the intention that it's tied to surveillance technology. I'm just not understanding the nexus and what the council is seeking to control there.
Yes, I would be happy to clarify just that point, that the current definition of surveillance data means any electronic data collected, captured, recorded, retained, processed, intercepted, or analyzed by surveillance technology acquired by the city or operated at the direction of the city. So with this new definition from the Boston ordinance, surveillance data does mean information generated specifically from the listed surveillance technologies. And Matt, did you have others to add?
Just a couple of kind of overarching observations from looking at a lot of these. The definitions in the spreadsheet, you can see, like, I kind of put some of the same terms to see like what terminology was used for defining different processes or key terms, including the surveillance technology. My sense is that a lot of these definitions came from a common source. There are variations among communities depending on how they adopted it, things they might have pared down, or things they might have added to definitions. The differences seem to be on the margins, generally speaking, in terms of the core substance of these ordinances. And so, just as an observation, in terms of process and looking at how you want to kind of tailor it to our community's needs and this council's preferences, starting from those kind of the same kind of core definitions. And Grace, the Boston materials really are kind of right down the middle in terms of what I saw across communities. There were a few outliers, but most of them were very similar to the language in Boston. And the other difference I would just throw out there is that some of these ordinances, probably half, apply organization-wide and not just to police. Any departments that would use what would be classified as surveillance technology. I'm not like throwing that out there to suggest it. I'm just saying it may be a thing to clarify ultimately in the ordinance, if there's any desire to address the technology, in a broader context. So,
Awesome. Thank you. Chandra?
I had a question under the use report. When it says an assessment in 5 and 6, 27? I guess, what does assessment mean? Like, is it a written assessment? Is it I don't know, I see like assessment identifying any potential adverse impacts of the police and technology. Like, an assessment can mean so much. I just, maybe that should be a little bit more specific, but I'm having trouble thinking of how it can be more specific.
Yeah, if I may respond, I agree, and I'm open to any suggestions. I think that, for my understanding, the point of these, especially in the use report, use policy, and the annual report, is like a lot of our council goals and things we do of like trying to be specific enough so that people have an idea of what you're expecting, but also not so limiting that we're requiring something beyond what might be feasible for that situation. So I think that, in my opinion, assessment is kind of left open to interpretation depending on what the specific technology or use is, that would vary. But I'm definitely open if we have any other ideas on what might be a better word to get that same kind of expectation across. Any other discussion or motion? I guess we're going a little out of order here, but it's not the first time we've seen this. Yes, Mary Alice?
Can I make a motion to keep this into committee and potentially into a study session? How do we handle that, Darcy?
I would recommend that you keep it in committee of the whole, and we can either add a separate discussion item, although every item of business on our agenda, even the actionable ones, have a period already for discussion. So you could do kind of like what you've done this evening. You can also push it to a different meeting too. If you wanted more than 2 weeks, we could have a discussion item in 2 weeks and then revisit an actionable item. It's completely your discretion what you can do with this.
So if I make a motion to keep it in committee and add it as a discussion item, is that allowable?
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay,
Well, it seems, because it is an action item, so do you mean instead of an action
yeah,
item?
because if we're going to have a study session, I assume that's like a discussion.
So then I would recommend that you keep it in committee and you don't specify a meeting and request a discussion item on the next COW. That way it's held in committee, and until we are told to bring it out of committee, it will just stay in committee.
I guess, just point of clarification, confused on why not just keep it in COW as a regular business that would have discussion, and then we could move or keep it in COW further from there.
I was trying to thread the needle with a study session and a committee meeting, so, I mean.
The only other thing I will add is it has not been uncommon with our items of business, just like items on this agenda, where departments make presentations as part of considering an item. So that is also within the scope of keeping this item in committee and bringing it at future items. If you wanted to have departmental level presentations as part of the discussion, that is applicable.
All right, well, I'm just going to make it simple. I'm just going to keep it in committee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mary Alice to keep this in committee, seconded by James. Any discussion further? Yes, Jaya?
I just want to say again, I think that there's been an incredible amount of progress and that it took a lot of work to get this here, and it's taken a lot of work to continue to make it better. And I want to encourage the spirit, which I think I at least entered into. I feel confident, and when Grace and I talked about this initially, of this being a space for discussion. I hear a lot of language around this that suggests it's somehow adversarial or intentionally leaving people out, but this wouldn't have even become something we could talk about if it didn't get on the agenda. So I think being able to say, yeah, let's make sure we're hearing from the staff who would be impacted. Let's make sure that it is fully compliant with Illinois law, right? Because we're looking at examples from other states. But also appreciate the expertise of folks from the ACLU, all the work that Grace has put in, all of the supplemental documents that have been provided to us. This is one of the best resourced ordinances or attempted at an ordinance I've ever seen in the almost 4 years that I've been on council. And I think that there's a lot of potential here that gets lost in unnecessary acrimony. So I just want to encourage us to take this as an opportunity to really serve our community and state the ways that we're going to make sure that our police department and our officers have clear guidance as we navigate a really unsafe world that is going to have a lot of impact from the federal government, and that we need our officers to be part of that conversation, just as we need our community members to be part of that conversation, so we can come up with something that has buy-in from everyone who will be impacted. And just want to make sure that we're kind of approaching it from that place of, this is an example for Urbana to take the lead. We're years behind some of these other cities, but this is an opportunity for us to say, what are the total needs of our city, and how do we put that into writing so that there is clear guidance, not only in terms of our values, but also for the officers who are going to be asked to abide by this.
Thank you. Yes, Diane?
Just reminded me today, we had a discussion with staff. There are a number of state laws that actually govern the use of technology, such as drones, body-worn cameras, license plate readers, and there's probably other laws. So that ought to be incorporated into this as well, so that we acknowledge that we operate under state law, not just local law. So.
Any further discussion? Yes, Darcy?
I just want to ask as a point of clarity for the clerk's office. So the motion was to keep in cow. Do you want it to come back at the next cow, or do you want to just tell us when you want to bring it back?
I personally would be in favor of just the next cow, but I'd let especially Mary Alice and James, who moved it, if you had anything in mind, and it can be a group discussion. So do you want it at next cow in 2 weeks, or did you have anything in mind when you moved and seconded?
I thought it was seconding, keeping it in cow, which means it would be on the next agenda.
Yeah, and that's fine. I guess my one point of caution is I know that the community, there's a lot of community members who are really engaged in this, and I want to set expectations, because I'm hoping that at the next time this comes, we do really kind of get into the meat of it and so forth. And my purpose at the next meeting is not to say, okay, good, we're going to move it on now. We might decide at the time that, okay, yeah, we think this is really close to being ready, but I know that the community continues to email us saying, please pass this, and I understand why. I just want to make sure that the community knows that that might not happen next committee of the whole. That's my only point.
But it sounds like we do mean keep in cow and come to the next cow meeting. Yep. Okay. Thanks for clarification. Yes, Chris?
What about all the edits that we've talked about? Is that going to be somehow compiled? And
Yes, I was taking some notes and have volunteered to compile. Also, if anyone else beats me to it, let me know. We don't have to
it
double
sounds
work
like,
it.
though, the mayor has mentioned the state laws that might be applicable to this.
Yep, and there were a lot of other helpful notes in the updated staff memo, I think from some of Matt's research from other cities and some other suggestions.
What I'm saying, and I think what you're agreeing to, is that I'd like to see all this kind of by the next cow, so it's available to us to see, like, you know, what is your final document, and what are the changes, and what are the laws, and kind of have this all in front of us so that we can at least have all the language. Go ahead, Jay.
So I would just say it's a lot for one person. So I think keeping it in COW, that gives us the chance to check in and see what edits have been made, see what communication needs to happen with that revised version and these external pieces, make sure that other city staff have a chance to review and weigh in. So I agree. I'm looking forward to seeing one document. But I think maybe even if it's giving, since Grace has so generously offered to make those updates, giving her a chance to make those updates, and then for other folks, you know, whether it's the pieces of legislation, being able to say, here's where we're going to need to put that in, right? Here's, you know, at least to kind of get us maybe by next COW, that would be amazing, but at least keep it on the agenda, keep it moving forward.
And then I just also want to flag one more thing. Sharice's suggestion that when does the police department do their line-by-line response to this?
Great. Yeah, thank you all for the discussion. Yes, I will compile to the best of my abilities some of the discussion from tonight and from the staff memo. And I think that was also another great suggestion that people also feel free to come with your own general ideas and maybe even like specific language recommendations.
Chief Boone would like to comment, if you'll allow that as chair.
Yes, go ahead, Chief Boone.
Thank you. I think for me, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this, because when policy is established, it's established on artifacts or rules or laws that already exist. We have no surveillance equipment. My concern is trying to do it at one blush. We're going to make mistakes on technology we don't have. We're not even close to having. Now, let me just state, as long as I've been a captain, my philosophy surrounding surveillance has always been three prongs. Is it legally by the Constitution, constitutionally legal, number one? Number two, do we have a moral obligation to impact, stop crime, injury? And lastly, does the community have the voice? That has always been my position. These folks that come up here to this mic and just make up stuff, a mere search surrounding facial recognition, my position's on that 5-6 years ago. So, folks, I embrace the concept of engaging in the government and the community surrounding the Fourth Amendment. My challenge is we're making policy on stuff we don't have.
Thank you. Yes, Jaya.
Yeah, I think this is why the conversation is so important, right? Is yes, right, that we don't have it now, but I think for future generations, for our community to understand what would be the process if we did, right? And so I think being able to provide that clarification is exactly part of that transparency piece, right? So even if it's saying, we don't have this, but if we were going to implement it, there's a process. I think that there's part of that need is coming out of new technologies that have been presented to council with no policy behind them, right? So not under your tenure, I see your face, but that's some of it too, right? Is so that if there is a proposal for something in the future, there's an opportunity for a discussion, there's an opportunity to make sure that the community understands it. So being kind of proactive, and that this is not a new conversation, but that there's a feeling that it feels more urgent now because of all the uncertainty at the federal level. And I do think that's an important distinction. This isn't something that's like, you know, the Urbana Police Department suddenly did something and this is needed. This is a conversation that's been happening for years to try to help support that commitment to transparency. And like I said, making sure that the police department is part of making a policy that actually is going to fit the need if and when we ever get there, right? And I hear that, right, that it might not feel like a good use of time, but these questions are already there. So why not put the answers in writing where people can actually say, oh, we do have that, or no, we don't even have that, that's not even an issue here, but if we did, we know that there'd be a policy, or there'd be a process, and that we'd be informed.
Thank you. Any last discussion? All right. Motion on the floor is to keep this ordinance in committee of the whole, back at the next committee of the whole. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. That ordinance passes. Next is new business. First is ordinance number 2025-02-004, an ordinance approving a major variance, buoy porch stair front yard at 501 West Washington Street, case number ZBA 2024-MAJ-03 from Community Development.
Good evening, Council. You are being asked to consider a major variance to reduce the required front yard from 15 feet to 10 feet to allow construction of porch stairs on a home addition at 501 West Washington Street. On January 15th, the Zoning Board of Appeals reviewed and voted unanimously to recommend that Council approve the requested variance with the condition that construction be in general conformance with the submitted site plan. The construction of these porch stairs and building addition would have no impact on city services or its budget. The activity would be in line with the comprehensive plan's designation for this future use of this property as residential. No one testified at the ZBA public hearing, and staff received one objection to the variance request. The staff report and meeting minutes are attached and contain additional information, which I'm happy to answer questions about. Regarding staff's recommendation to deny, the legal criteria to grant any variance requires that there be a special circumstance or practical difficulty related to a parcel or structure that makes adhering to the zoning ordinance difficult or impossible. Granting a variance is unwarranted without special circumstances or practical difficulties. Neither the applicant, staff, nor the ZBA found any special circumstances or practical difficulties in this case. So staff continues to recommend that City Council deny the major variance because the threshold condition for a variance is not met. While the request will not cause harm to the neighborhood and is more visually appealing than alternatives that comply with the zoning ordinance, a variance is not the proper mechanism to achieve the desired outcome. If City Council approves the variance request, it will need to articulate a special circumstance or practical difficulty of the parcel or the building in meeting the implementation of the zoning ordinance. There is a blank in the draft ordinance for this finding, otherwise the ordinance will not be legally sufficient. Independent of the outcome of this particular request, staff would like to draft an amendment to the zoning ordinance in the near future to amend the setback requirements of porch stairs to allow them to encroach into a minimum required yard to the same extent that porches themselves are allowed to encroach, and to allow further encroachment if needed to bring the rise and run of the stairs up to current building code standards. If City Council is open to considering an amendment to the zoning ordinance, staff would bring a draft amendment to Plan Commission for their review. Got some pictures for you. This is the existing porch. It's a short porch. The stairs come down off of the side so that they aren't currently encroaching into the required yard. Here you have the existing versus the proposed porch. The existing porch is shown here with the stairs. The walkway goes diagonally and then down to the street. The proposed activity is to build this addition here, which is within the building area of the parcel, and then the landing and the stairs would encroach into the 25-foot required front yard. This is a close-up of the proposed activity. The porch itself, the landing, would be legally compliant because it is allowed to encroach 5 feet into that required yard, but the 5 feet encroachment is the maximum. The stairs are the thing that would actually be encroaching into the required front yard. And that's why we have this line here of limit of encroachment by ordinance. That's a 5-foot line, and then the extra 5 feet is for the stairs. And then we have a little elevation version of this, a cross-sectional. Here is the required front yard. Here's the 5-foot encroachment that's allowed for the porch landing, and then the stairs are the additional 5-foot encroachment. So here are the recommendations that I just read. ZBA recommended to grant the requested variance with the condition that it can be in general conformance with the submitted plan. Staff found that the request was not due to special circumstances. Staff would like to present an ordinance text amendment to Plan Commission that would allow porch stairs to encroach into a required yard. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. The applicant is here to answer questions or to make a presentation. It's Mr. Fell on behalf of the property owner, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Marcus. Questions? James?
So if we went ahead and approved this based on the recommendation of the Zoning Board of Appeals, that would not prevent staff from coming to bring us the zoning variance, and then eventually if we approve that, it would be compliant anyway, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. You would have to state a special circumstance or practical difficulty, though, when you did approve the variance. So the parcel has X, or the building is X, and that is a special circumstance because of Y, and that's why we are granting this, so that it's not seen as a special privilege for this parcel that other people shouldn't also be granted.
Okay, I understand that. I just don't recall council, I mean, I've seen maybe 20 of these at this point. I don't recall council being required to define that for the previous ones.
I think in this case, it's because the Zoning Board of Appeals failed to articulate a special circumstance or practical difficulty during their public hearing.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris?
Does the applicant have special reasons? Maybe we should hear from.
I would defer to Mr. Fell.
Okay, we're on. Thank you, Marcus, for the staff report. He always does a great job. I know that the board had a little trouble trying to justify a special circumstance here, and really our special circumstance is that we're dealing with a neighborhood and a zoning condition which is exactly the opposite of how we want to do zoning. We have a house a neighborhood that was built 40 years before zoning was laid over top of it, and the zoning we lay over top of that is a vanilla homogeneous thing that does the best we can for this particular place. The way we want to develop a city is to have a zoning ordinance that's comprehensive and widespread, and develop properties and buildings and structures within that ordinance to conform to it so that our city is a cohesive whole. What we have here is an entire neighborhood that had to have the best we could do blanket zoning put on top of it after the neighborhood was completely built. Now, that means that we're working in a space, in a house where it actually conforms to the zoning ordinance, but to add on to it makes it prohibitive to do that. So the circumstance is that the house was built before the zoning ordinance was put into effect. It kind of is along the line of the last one of these I had in Urbana, was the same, almost exact identical situation, and that was on, it happened to be on the 900 and 1000 block of East Main Street. where, again, the zoning ordinance was put into effect after all those structures were built, and fully half of those 2 blocks were out of compliance with the zoning ordinance. Just when the zoning ordinance was enacted, they were non-conforming. So that's kind of our circumstances. We have to force what we want to do into an ordinance that wasn't in place when these buildings were built. That make sense?
Did you have a follow-up?
I did. So, what about Marcus's fix of rewriting our ordinance?
Well, sure, that's a fix. That solves this problem, and I think but I can say this is my job, and this same problem exists all over the place when we try to add on to, especially houses in these older neighborhoods, that the setback requirements, many of the houses don't conform to those. So if we want to, literally the previous example, if we wanted to add on to the back of that house, we had to tear off the front because we were too close to the front yard setback, right? So it was legislated in illegally. I mean, this case wasn't illegal, but we're just to the edge. We're doing what is a logical progression of an addition to this house in the neighborhood is against the ordinance.
Mary Alice?
So if I'm hearing Mr. Fell correctly, I think what he's saying, the special circumstances that the construction of the property was prior to the zoning ordinance.
Correct.
Is that in a nutshell what
Correct.
you're saying?
Yes.
Chandra?
So if this major variance is denied, Marcus, can those stairs still be built?
Not in the configuration or the direction that they would like to. They could run them westward towards the driveway, which is a shared driveway with the neighbor, and that would also, I think, lead to loss of living space in the building addition that they were proposing to build. If the zoning ordinance amendment was written and passed by city council, then they would be able to build the way they would like to. There would be a delay while that work was done.
Okay.
Jay?
I'm thinking back to the conversation about duplexes, and wasn't part of the impetus to trying to change that for the same kind of reason, is that a good chunk of the properties in a particular area are non-compliant or couldn't do what they want to or should be able to do, that there isn't a unique circumstance, right? Right, like in this situation, it sounds like actually a lot of the houses could benefit from this change in the ordinance. And so is that kind of the logic from the staff recommendation, is it doesn't meet that criteria because a lot of properties would be in that same situation?
Correct, and that's where the hope that regardless of how you decide on the requested variance, we would hope that we would be directed to amend the zoning ordinance to take that onus away. As Mr. Fell alluded to, many of the houses on this double block face, their porch stairs are legally non-conforming because they all come out towards the street except for one. 9 out of 10 of them are legally non-conforming. If they needed to do something to the front of their porches, they'd have to get a variance to be legally conforming. And amending the zoning ordinance would fix that, but that is a separate issue from the variance request that you have in front of you. And so I think Ms. Wu was moving towards maybe the special circumstance or practical difficulty. Right, which does apply, though, to everybody on this block and everybody in an R2 through R5 zoning district whose property's required front yard is the average of all of the houses on the block, and therefore, is running very close to the front property line.
Other questions? Sharice, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I think a question that I have is, so Marcus, are you saying that is the council's responsibility to change the zoning, or would that fall under community development or something like?
The
I
planning
need to understand
division,
that. I'm not.
the planning division would work on amending the language and then bringing that to Plan Commission for their review and recommendation to City Council. And then we would bring that to City Council Committee of the Whole for discussion and then review and decision.
Okay, so my other question, if I can continue just a little bit more, if everyone on in this particular area, well, not everyone, let's just say one other person needs to repair their porch, and the repair that is recommended by the contractor means that they have to go against that variance. What you're basically also saying is that that homeowner would not be able to repair their the way the zoning ordinance is now. They would not be allowed to actually repair their porch.
So I'll clarify for you, because this is where it gets into the single words and phrases of the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, practical difficulties, so on and so forth, special circumstances.
If somebody was repairing, if their stairs looked like this here and they needed to repair them, they could do that if they were doing it in the exact same location as those stairs were. In this case, the stairs are proposing to be shifted to the northeast by about 8 feet. So it loses that exemption for allowing stairs that are already encroaching to continue to encroach and be repaired. It's because they are not going to be done in exactly the same location, and that's probably a less likely happening for somebody who's wanting to repair their stairs. If they want to repair their stairs in the same location, they would not have a problem. This is not considered a repair in the exact same location.
So, in other words, they'd have to have a special circumstance, like, for example, the resident is unable to, they have to change the configuration or something like that because the way that the stairs are now or the way that the porch is located now is not, that would be a special circumstance. They're not capable of climbing these stairs, or they're not capable of doing something, so we have to make it, we have to change the configuration. Would that constitute a special consideration or practical difficulty? Or
I think, say, maybe a good example might be if all of a sudden we learned that there was a sanitary or storm sewer pipe running underneath the house that nobody knew about, and maybe that's why the stairs weren't going down the front in the first place, and it needed to be replaced, and they couldn't be put in the exact same location, so they needed to be shifted further away from where they are
structural.
now. Yes, that would
So
be
it has to be something
one.
structural, not something that would impede on the quality of life of the owner or something like that. It has to be something structurally. Okay.
Not typically a quality of life issue. We do have some allowances and exemptions for mobility issues.
Okay. So your recommendation then is that we move to change the zoning in order to make it okay for somebody to work on their own home, because right now all of their variances are illegal. I'm trying to figure that one out. Everybody's home, everybody would be able, that way everyone who would need to make changes or have the right actually to make changes to their home, they could do that, within legal.
Yes. The planning division does recommend that we work towards amending the zoning ordinance to remove this barrier, in addition to whatever decision you come to on the variance.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've got more questions. I had a question or two I'll slip in. Did you already have some?
I had a question.
You have a question? Okay, you go ahead.
So, and I could be forgetting some of the details of this case, but we had a case in front of us on Illinois and I think Cedar, in which they wanted to tear down the garage and rebuild the garage in the same location, which required a major variance. And they wanted to do that because they didn't want to get rid of their garden. And I do not remember us ever having
I
to say
remember
what
that.
the special circumstance was. And that got approved
That's quite possible, yes.
within the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
It just is an example of a time where something has been approved that we
Right.
didn't specify what the special or
I think,
practical.
and if I remember that one correctly, that was a corner lot backing onto a alley.
Right into the alley.
Yep.
And so I'm not remembering what, and that was, I believe, Cat Trotter's case. I could see that the special circumstance and practical difficulty in that case would be, this is a corner lot. I know there was a lot of discussion about, well, should they have their driveway come out onto Cedar versus coming out onto the alley? There were a lot of special circumstances and practical difficulties on that lot that you would not see the combination of that in other places in the R2 or R3 zoning district, whereas this is like all of the houses on this block are R2 and they all are subject to this 25-foot setback. So how is this one special compared to the other 9?
Right, so I'm trying to remember, so you said the average front yard setback, is the default for R2 15 feet?
The default is 15 with an average of 15 to 25.
Right,
So
so
in-
I guess what I'm trying to say here is, like, if I think of Pennsylvania, for example, that has those houses set really, really far back.
Right.
Right, try and take an average of that is gonna be pretty wild. So I'm just wondering if, because if you count the extra 5 feet, and so basically it encroaches 10 feet and there's a 25-foot setback, right? That's a 15-foot setback is what I'm saying. If you go by that kind of standard, not the one where we average out all the front.
Right.
Yeah, all right, I just want to throw that out there.
I'm going to hit 2 questions for you, Marcus. Is there a safety recommendation for setbacks? Like, is this aesthetic? There was just one comment that brought up visibility being the issue. I'm just wondering, as a technical
Planning
thing,
staff
where's that?
see no safety concerns with a 15-foot setback here, which is why the default, the minimum setback is 15 feet.
And other question is, could the reason for approving the major variance be that council does direct amendment to the zoning ordinance? Are those mutually exclusive, or could that be the reason that we found that maybe this isn't necessary and we plan to change it, so that's why we'll grant this and move forward?
I will answer and then defer to Mr. Fell, but also I'll defer to the city attorney and the administrator. I've only been here 8 years. I have not seen a variance granted saying, we normally wouldn't do this, but we plan on having a zoning amendment change, which would have made this a moot point if the zoning had been different. And I don't know state planning law that well, but I don't think that is a valid enough reason to, because worst case scenario, 6 months from now, there's different members on city council and they think it's a bad idea and it doesn't get changed.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other additional weigh-in from staff? Makes sense. Okay. Other questions? Or did you have a weigh-in?
I would just like to say is kind of the last thing. I do believe of special circumstances. This house was built 40 years before there was a zoning ordinance, but I'll go with Marcus and say, I think our special circumstance is, even the planning department realizes the zoning ordinance is flawed enough they want to change it to fix this rule. So that kind of demonstrates to me as special circumstance. Staff understands that what they're forced to do by law, because they have to deny it, because they have to, they realize that's flawed. So to me, that's a special circumstance. So.
Chris, did you have questions or motions?
I think Mr. Feld just summarized what I was going to say, Marcus. I mean, we're saying he's violating the rules, but the rules need to be changed. There's your special circumstance. So
Again,
I don't know. I mean,
I will defer to the city attorney
okay.
to determine if that's legally sufficient.
Any other questions? We don't yet have a motion.
I do have a question. One more.
Go ahead.
Is there is there a time factor on this particular variance? Is there Mr. Fell? Is there a time when this porch needs to be done or not, or however?
Spring, when the weather gets nice. We don't want to dig before middle of April, probably.
So we could actually, this could be discussed and things could be done for a little while before we start talking about whether or not we go against the zoning board or the zoning law, or if we change it. You'll have some time for us to. There'll be some time for us to contemplate all this.
Could be, but ideally we have a decision so we can move forward whether this works or not. You know, if it's denied and we have to redesign the project, we want to have it redesigned so we can have construction begin at the same time.
So then my question next is, can you redesign it anyway in the event that it doesn't get that it doesn't get passed, but still have time to try to make any changes?
Yes.
So that way, if it's not passed, then you already have Plan B to go by.
Well, we don't have Plan B yet, but we will if it doesn't pass.
I know what I'm saying is that in the event that this doesn't go forward, you already have a Plan B in place. Is what I'm saying.
If it doesn't go forward and we know that soon, we have time to change the design in order to secure a building permit before we would like to begin construction. Part of the issue is between when this is approved or denied. Between that time and putting this in for a building permit, we have to do all the construction drawings, so there's a month worth of time just to generate the documents to put it in for a building permit, no matter what the design is.
Okay.
Thank you for that additional questions and input there. Mary Alice?
I was wondering if the city attorney could weigh in on some of these questions.
The specific question of the special circumstance, and just that's something I want to look at more closely. I haven't had a chance to research it, so pretty fact-specific kind of inquiry for a situation like this. So I'd want to take a minute and take a closer look.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would like to move on to the City Council regular agenda. Ordinance number 2025-02004, an ordinance approving a major variance for Boy Porch Stair Front Yard at 501 West Washington Street, case number ZBA 2024 MAJ 03, with no recommendation.
Do we have a second?
I'll second. May I ask a question? Do you have any additional information or questions that you need checked into before next week by staff
by planning division staff.
Well, it's really waiting for from the city attorney at
Just
the
checking,
moment.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jaya?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be voting against this because I don't think it meets the criteria. I think it's problematic the way we're trying to selectively choose which of our zoning ordinances we feel like it's different enough, so we're going to pass it. Or I agree absolutely with the recommendation from the staff to change this, right? There's a fix for this. But I don't think it's appropriate to say, well, we know it's wrong, so we're just going to play by different rules. I don't think that's appropriate. I think we need to change the rules. And I think there's been a lot of pushback on previous attempts to change the rules for trying to address exactly these same kinds of situations. So if we're not going to do that for duplexes, why are we doing it for somebody's porch? I just think that's really unfair, and I think that our residents deserve a consistent approach. So I appreciate the city staff coming up with a solution to this problem. At least we can have a solution to this problem, but I don't think it's appropriate to say, well, we get that this isn't right, so we're just going to play by different rules and pretend that these aren't the rules. I think that is wildly inappropriate for a city to even be considering. So I plan to vote against this, even though I wish, the property owner and the developer is the best. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I hope we can pass a change to our ordinance quickly to make it possible. But it's not fair to hold some people to different standards.
Other discussion? Mary Alice, would you mind taking the chair, please?
Sure, I'll take the chair. Chair recognizes Grace.
Thank you. I feel torn on this one. I agree with some of Jaya's points there for sure about having, and with the staff recommendation that we need to have legitimate points and stick with our process and have some consistency and fairness across all these parcels. I also agree with the amending our zoning, and if we find things that continuously come across that need to be changed, I'm down with that for this as much as I was on board with the seemingly arbitrary size requirements on duplexes as well. So I think if we are going to do that, maybe reconsider a bunch of things in zoning as we've come across them over the years. I can also see some of the other side, that the special circumstance of this house being built in 1912 before the zoning regulations were there. It is only the stairs that are the problem, right? The entire addition and the landing and everything is okay. It's just 5 feet of stairs, which also with the changes of accessibility and stair height, but also here that there is a way around it. It just might not be convenient. So I'm torn on this one. I appreciate keeping it in the regular agenda. If we can hear more from the city attorney as far as some of the legality / maybe legal ethics as far as granting a major variance in anticipation that we are going to be changing the rules for everyone later on. I think that's all.
All right, I relinquish the chair back to Grace.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Yes, Chandra?
How quickly can that amendment be written and implemented?
I would say it could probably come to Plan Commission. It does have to do the legal notice and all that stuff. Probably beginning of April, it could make it to Plan Commission. We do have to workshop it through the division and the department and the rest of the city, because it does impact things like rights of way and things like that, and could probably be at city council at end of April if staff were directed to move it along like that with our resources.
Okay. That's still spring. Okay.
Okay, looks like end of discussion on that. So again, motion on the floor, moving this to regular agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that passes for now. On to city council. Yes.
Can I make a motion to extend the meeting till 11 p.m.?
Yes. Thank you. Do we need a second?
Second.
Second. To extend till 11, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you for that and keeping an eye on the time. Next item is ordinance number 2025-02-006, an ordinance amending Schedule A of Section 2362 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, increasing state speed limits in certain zones, correcting errors and omissions in Schedule A of various streets by Public Works.
Okay, I've also been keeping an eye on the time, so thank you for passing that. That's the only eye patch joke I'm going to make tonight. Apologize. I hope it's not too distracting. Okay, so just kind of give a couple of visuals here. We have, if I can get the right pot, yes. So for this ordinance that we're proposing, is brought forward to Traffic Commission, to City Council and to city staff, that there were a few errors and omissions in one of the schedules for the local traffic code as it relates to speed limits that are other than 30 miles per hour, essentially, other than the state statute of 30 miles per hour. And so, thanks to Charlie Smythe for bringing these forward. City staff investigated these, and we did find that there were a number of errors and omissions. There's kind of a colored history to the local traffic code, which only things like that the city attorney and the city engineer might find interesting, but it's hard to keep all these things straight, I think, suffice it to say, over time. There have been multiple times when the entire traffic code has been replaced. 94, 95 was an example of that. And so there's not been, it was challenging to try to make sense of the history. So, short story, there were a number of locations where the posted speed limit, say for 40 miles per hour or 45 miles per hour, was not supported by an ordinance in city code. There were some circumstances where that was the case, and we made reviews of, engineering reviewed the locations and decided to change what was out there previously. Most of these changes, most of the lines in the ordinance are keeping the speed limits the way they are, so no changes. This map, I just wanted to illustrate, these are the changes that we were either have made already or proposing to make. And so down on Windsor Road, just as it's getting up to High Cross Road, it had been posted for 40 miles per hour for some time, but the ordinance that was on the books is for 45 miles per hour. So we went ahead and changed the signs to revert back to what the ordinance says. Philo Road from Farallon Drive down to Colorado Avenue, we reduced it. That was reviewed as, wasn't supported by an ordinance. It was posted for 35 miles per hour. And reviewing the context of that road with residential, and then the Philo Road Business District with mid-block crossings and things like that, bike lanes, reduced from 35 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour. Similarly, up here, Main Street heading east from Learman Avenue and Pfeffer Road over there north of Washington Street. We're posted at 35 miles per hour. We've reduced that to 30 miles per hour since for the residential neighborhoods there, lack of sidewalks, still with pedestrian traffic and things like that, for safety considerations primarily. And these changes were put into effect as, essentially because a street will default to 30 miles per hour unless there's action taken by City Council. And then the one change that we want to propose that we haven't changed signs yet is on Lincoln Avenue, north of Bradley up to Anthony Drive, is to lower that speed limit from 40 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour. There's a Lincoln Avenue, if you go north from University, it's 30 miles per hour. You get north of, I believe this is Sunset, and it changes to 35 miles per hour, and pretty quickly changes from 35 to 40 when you get north of Bradley. So just, in the context of this street with a lot of pedestrian traffic, a lot of transit riders who are currently crossing 4 lanes of traffic from their bus stops to their apartments or other destinations. So that was our recommendation to Traffic Commission, which was approved by Traffic Commission. And so then, in the table of the ordinance itself, again, most of these are really just codifying what's out there right now, but it also, tabulates what was in the map as well. So that's kind of the short of it. Any questions?
Mary Alice?
My biggest question is, how did we get to this point that people were changing speed limits like officially on our streets?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any ideas in terms of how it happened?
Well, I think that as streets got annexed into the city, I think this was an I that didn't get dotted, so Pfeffer Road is a kind of a simple example. Pfeffer Road, out there east of Scottswood subdivision, 35 miles per hour is fairly common for a road outside of in an unincorporated area, and so it just may have been one of those things that's what it was, and nobody took action to change it. And then other things like I know that North Lincoln Avenue up to Olympian Drive, like all that was designed, and I mean this is very much by engineering, the curves and all that were designed for this particular speed limit. It just wasn't codified. So, it was designed for that, posted for that. It just didn't make it into this step. That's what I think. I'm just guessing.
Other questions? Chandra?
I'll make a motion. I'll move approval of ordinance number 2025-02-006, an ordinance amending Schedule A of Section 23-62 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, increasing state speed limits in certain zones, correcting errors and omissions in Schedule A for various streets, onto City Council for approval on the consent agenda.
Second.
Oops, discussion. Yes, Mary Alice.
I actually was going to ask if I could ask Sharice her opinion, because the only thing that we are really changing in the code is the Lincoln Avenue in her ward.
Sure. Regarding the speed limit that goes from 35 to 40 miles an hour, I understand the particular logic of that, mainly because that is a dangerous, the intersection at Lincoln and Bradley is dangerous. And it does seem as if you stop at that one intersection and you're in the 35 mile per hour zone, and then you can just as quickly move. When you go forward, if you're stopped, you can go up to 40. You can go up to 40 miles an hour heading toward the highway, and it's the same way coming off of the highway before you get to that intersection at Lincoln and Bradley. And there are often pedestrians crossing the street, especially those coming from campus, and they have to cross the street to get to their apartment buildings. Because when they get off of the bus, they're actually on the other side of the street, and it can be dangerous. I've often complained about that particular intersection because my issue is that there's no left turn only lane, and people coming off of Kohler to the east and from Goodwin to the west are usually waiting for a while for cars to go straight, and if there's a bus there, it can become a serious problem, and I'm always afraid that someone's going to get hit. So I don't have a problem with that speed limit going down.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor for moving this to the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Our penultimate item of business for tonight is resolution number 2025-02-013R, resolution approving a license agreement with New Lincoln Square LLC, 6 total signs adjacent to Lincoln Square Mall. Public Works looks like also John. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you. Okay, so the basic story behind this resolution here, the purpose of this license agreement is the signs that advertise and announce Lincoln Square in this block of Vine, Elm, Race, and Illinois. These signs have been in city right-of-way without a formal license agreement for, I guess, as long as they've been there. And there's right now an impetus to move one of the signs, the sign at Race and Green Street. Currently, it's in the northeast corner of that intersection in a little sliver of a private parcel thing here. So in this little sliver here is where it's located. There is another sign for a certain hotel that's wanting to go there, and so Lincoln Square sign is going to go into this median here in the dead end of Green Street. And so what the license agreement is just crafted as a standard language that we have. There's a annual license fee associated with it based on the square footage of the sign's footprints, and we have taken a look for just to double check that the new location there at Race and Green didn't throw up any red flags for sight distance or sight triangles or anything like that. So that's the what we're doing and why. Any questions?
Fwin, could you clarify what you just said, that staff has reviewed like site safety, like visibility of all these signs already?
Yes. Well, I'd say we've looked at the proposed location of the new sign. Yeah, and we are not aware of any issues of the existing signs that are in place currently.
Thank you. Any other questions or motion? Mary Alice?
I will move on to the next city council consent agenda, resolution number 2025-02013R, resolution approving a license agreement with New Lincoln Square LLC for 6 total signs adjacent to Lincoln Square Mall.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by James for consent agenda on city council. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
And last order of business is resolution number 2025-02-014R, resolution approving the Equity and Quality of Life EQL program for fiscal year 2025 from Public Works.
Okay, thank you. This one, I'm going to try to pull up a web map. Every time I try it, it gives me a little issue, so let's try this out. All right, don't restore. All right. So this is us following up on, of course, a mayor and council goal to initiate a second EQL program in 2025. And what we're doing with this is we used as the basis of this proposed program the community needs survey our grants division managed, and I think we had it back in, I want to say, March or April of last year. We got the results in, and used the community needs survey as a way of identifying, well, what is the type of improvement that people are most asking for, and so that we focused in on the types of improvements that got the most votes, and then Public Works, the Grants Division, we partnered with Police Department to find areas in the city with low-income statistics, low to moderate income statistics, along with some type of crime, a higher crime rate that perhaps infrastructure might be able to be effective, or at least a helpful piece in some of the problems there. The police department provided a really interesting analysis of a particular type of crime happening in the night hours, that where a call would have originated from outside of a building, to essentially try to focus on types of calls that would street light, the lighting of the area would have potentially helped the situation. And so it created a heat map of the city, and there was a pretty clear, a few clear hotspots in the city that we were able to focus on. And so kind of the intersection of those ideas with looking in these community development target areas led us to the Silverwood neighborhood as kind of our recommendation for the prime focus for this EQL program. And there's some other areas for traffic calming I'll touch on in a minute, but looking in the Silverwood neighborhood here, bounded by roughly Harding Drive, Philo Road, Silver Street, and Cottage Grove Avenue. The yellow lines shown on the map are indicating that we're proposing to supplement the street lighting that's there right now. We have street lights shown with X's. They're actually spaced relatively far apart for kind of uniform light coverage. And we want to supplement with additional lighting. Again, not attempting to light it up like a Walmart parking lot, but to provide uniform, lighting for the neighborhood. And we've got the blue areas shown up here at Harding and Vaughter are filling in gaps in the sidewalk network. Where you can kind of make out where there's a sidewalk west of the blue line, but not within it, and connecting down to Vaughter Street. So we'll get some better connectivity within the neighborhood. There's still going to be some sidewalk gaps within the neighborhood, but we'll be able to make take a good chunk out of those gaps. And then the pink areas over here are following up on some either missing curb ramps, sidewalk curb ramps, or poor condition, poor compliance curb ramps are identified in our pedestrian master plan. In addition to providing better curb ramps for pedestrian crossings, we are interested in looking at opportunity to push the curb lines out a little bit into Cottage Grove to create a little bit of a traffic calming effect. As we know, there have been some speed-related crashes on Cottage Grove, this segment of Cottage Grove, and so we'd like to try to take this opportunity to provide a little bit of a calming effect with bumping the curbs out when we do that work. Because I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the top three types of improvements, it was in answer to the question of, if I can find this, which infrastructure improvements, if any, are needed in your neighborhood, select all that apply, and pedestrian facilities, streetlights, and traffic calming, or speed-related concerns. I don't think traffic calming was necessarily the word everybody used, but concerned about speed in their neighborhood. Those were the top three, and then the way we were building this program out and we're proposing is to spend, take the $1 million that's allocated by council in the capital improvement plan to approximately a little more than half towards pedestrian facilities, about a third towards streetlights, and the remainder to traffic calming. As we state in the memo, it kind of breaks down into approximately $60,000 in engineering costs, $835,000 in construction costs, and about $100,000 in contingencies, just to, as we develop the designs to see what the actual costs are. Then outside of the Silverwood neighborhood, there are a few traffic calming locations. These are for anybody who was paying attention to what we did with the first EQL program. We did have some speed studies that were done, and the results of these speed studies did identify a few locations where we had statistically significant speeding, or it looks like there's some opportunities where we may want to try some traffic calming, kind of a lighter, cheaper, simpler, whatever the kind of buzzwords are. We have some concepts that we want to try out related to using some vertical delineators, vertical plastic posts near some mid-block crossings, near some intersections, to try to give the not so much a physical barrier for traffic, but more of a psychological deterrent for going as fast, make it a little uncomfortable for vehicles who are trying to travel above speed while still providing, space for vehicles to make the normal movements they would need to in a safe way. Broadway Avenue in particular is got some really good opportunities. We've got residential neighborhoods on the east side, people trying to get across to the paths, the park, things like that by foot, and there's a number of bus stops and mid-block crossings. That'd be a good opportunity for us to try out some of these traffic calming measures. Kerr Avenue, also from Broadway to Cunningham, and then Cottage Grove, I believe it was from Washington down to Pennsylvania. What all those street segments have in common is those orange lines, there's no stop control, between, in those orange lines. So fairly long segments of no stop control, which will, lend itself to putting your foot down on the pedal a little more. So kind of hit you with a lot there. Happy to go over anything or answer questions the council has.
Chris?
Thanks. Remind me again, EQL projects are local money or federal money?
They're local unrestricted funds.
Okay, but it's our money, and the lunatic king can't get it, right?
We have been supplementing the work with, I heard you, Sharice. We have been supplementing the work with community development block grant money. Yes, but we do, that $1 million is unrestricted general funds.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
I had a question, if you could please share the community needs survey from this round.
Yes.
Braden did share it, but it seems to be like messing up my internet browser or something every time. So I don't know if that could be sent to everyone or in the supplemental memo or something, but I'd like to see that community needs survey.
For sure, yeah. And I'll work with Brandon to make sure it's accessible. I know that it's just such a rich survey with so much information in there. We were also kind of trying to mine the information in it, Public Works, to make sure some people put in some very particular, suggestions or concerns they had, which we didn't try to utilize a lot of that for these particular projects, but very useful to understand where people are seeing things. So I'll get with Braden on that.
And then I had one more. I don't recall the crime rates being any part of the consideration in the first time around. Is that correct?
They were, and I know this. The first round predated me, but I know that crime statistics was a consideration in particular. For example, the Florida Avenue streetlights, which we are actually just now going to open bids on Friday for these. That we're going to install streetlights from James Cherry Drive at Thomas Paine Elementary over to Smith Road. This area is not in the community development target area, but by crime rate statistics, it was eligible for EQL program last time.
Did we have a set eligibility on that? I guess if you could maybe share some more information. I didn't remember there being set eligibility criteria the first time around.
If I can offer, I was really involved, and then John helped me out probably halfway through the process. So what we did, the way we did it was we had a scoring rubric that we developed with BPAC. And so the first time we did it, we took random, we opened it up and people made suggestions about locations and stuff. And then we had this whole scoring thing, and that scoring thing included traffic accidents. It included 2 different levels of crime. I think it included whether or not it was included in the pedestrian master plan, and certainly whether or not it was included in the target areas for lower income folks. And the way it was set up is it was designed so that there was a heavy emphasis on the low income areas, and that was the majority of the projects were there because that was the heavier points were there. But crime was definitely a part of the point system.
Thank you. Other questions or motion? You're us.
I will move.
Well, I have a real quick.
Go ahead, Sharice.
John?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm sorry, just real quick. John, on Broadway, what are your recommendations? I know I had said something the last time about the fact that Broadway, I think there was finally a speed sign put up because it didn't have anything. What are your suggestions for Broadway?
Well, yeah, sure. The kind of the concept that we still have to flesh out in detail is, for example, let's say there is, all right, so looking at Broadway and Kerr, there's a crossing, if you're able to see the screen, south of Kerr.
It'll come up in about 30 seconds.
Okay, very good.
I am looking at the YouTube, but YouTube has a delay. So.
Oh, very good. Well, imagine, if you will, there's a crosswalk on the south side of the intersection of Kerr and Broadway. There's no stop sign for people on Broadway, drivers on Broadway Avenue. So what we could look to use is, when I'm saying vertical delineators, I'm talking about like plastic tubes that are maybe 3 foot tall, mounted to the pavement, considering like a line of them in the middle of the street in advance of the crossing, and then as you get closer to the intersection, a line of the posts kind of on the edge of each side of the street, as if you were bumping the curb out, but you're not actually pushing the curb out, so you're kind of squeezing the street to be a little narrower there. And so what this does is it encourages, what was the phrase, lane discipline by motorists.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying?
It kind of makes sense. I just know that, the MTD goes down Broadway, and it kind of goes from a wider Cobbler Street to a narrower concrete or asphalt street.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Kerr is about a block from that demarcation. Maybe.
I'm sorry, there's been an internal error. You will be disconnected now. Goodbye.
Did we lose you, Sharice? Sounded like.
Yes.
Okay. We got 7 minutes left. Mary Alice?
So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to send it to regular, not consent, so that whoever else has questions, they can ask them then. Okay, I move resolution number 2025-02014R, resolution approving the Equity and Quality of Life, EQL program for fiscal year 2025 to the regular city council agenda.
Second.
We have moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Jaya to move this to city council on the regular agenda. Any last quick discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Last one, council input and communication. Any last minute words? Seeing none, we are.
I think the battery died. Hello?
Shreese, we are at council input and communications. We have just 7 minutes left before the end of the meeting. We did keep that last item of business in the regular agenda, so we can talk about it again at council. Did you have any council input for tonight?
No, I'm sorry. I think my phone died just right when I was finishing that. I didn't hear anything that you just, I heard that you said you're at council input. No, right now I don't have any council input.
Thank you. Then with no further business, we are adjourned.